At that moment, I was freaking out. I had no idea what was going on. And then I was with Jesus, and I was sitting on his lap, and he had some angels sing to me to calm me down.
The little boy who told the world he had seen Jesus 22 years ago has finally returned. He is now 25 years old, and for the first time, the adult behind one of the world's most extraordinary childhood encounters is revealing everything in his own words. His account reached millions. A best-selling book and major film followed. Then the boy seemed to vanish. The interviews stopped. The cameras disappeared. For years, few people knew what had happened to him, or whether he still believed what he had said as a child. Now, more than 20 years later, he has returned. And for the first time, the world can hear the answer from the adult who has carried that memory for nearly his entire life. Does he still believe he truly saw Jesus? The boy was gone. When Colton returned to wide public attention in May 2025, he was 25 years old. The round-faced child from old television interviews was gone. In his place stood a married man with a deeper voice, an ordinary job, a young family, and an experience he had never been able to leave behind. He was working as an electrician and serving as a worship pastor. He and his wife were welcoming their first child. His life looked quiet and normal, far removed from the years when millions knew his face. That contrast is what made his return so powerful. The world remembered a little boy speaking in simple sentences about heaven. It remembered the book, the film, and the impossible questions adults placed before a child. But while that image remained frozen, Colton grew up. He finished school, found work, married, and built a life far from the attention that once surrounded him. For many viewers, he had simply disappeared. Yet the real question was never where he had gone. It was what had happened to the memory during those missing years. Childhood memories can fade. A child can grow embarrassed by something he once said. A person carrying a famous account can decide that the easiest path is silence. Colton had every chance to do that. He could have returned and said the encounter no longer felt real. He could have blamed his age, the medicine, the fear, or the adults around him. He could have allowed the boy the world remembered to remain only a character in an old book. Instead, he came back as a husband and father, still carrying the same central memory. He still remembered looking down at an operating room. He still remembered his parents praying. He still remembered the angels, and he still remembered being held by Jesus. But before hearing what the man finally said, the clock must return to February 27th, 2003, when a common childhood illness began turning into a fight for his life. 5 days before the operating room. Colton first became ill on February 27th, 2003. He complained of stomach pain and developed a fever. He was not yet 4 years old, and the first explanation sounded ordinary: stomach flu. For a short time, he appeared to improve. Then the pain returned. He began vomiting. His body weakened. The family trip that had started with hope became a frightening effort to find out what was happening inside him. The danger was his appendix. Appendicitis begins when the appendix becomes inflamed. Without treatment, it can rupture and release infection into the abdomen. In a small child, the symptoms can be difficult to identify. The longer the infection spreads, the greater the danger. By March 5th, Todd and Sonia Burpo knew they could not keep waiting. They removed Colton from the local hospital in Imperial, Nebraska, and drove him more than an hour to Great Plains Regional Medical Center in North Platte. The medical team there found what had been missed. Colton's appendix had ruptured. An abscess had formed. The surgeon, Dr. Timothy O'Halloran, prepared him for an emergency operation. Hospital workers separated Colton from his parents. Sonia remained closer to the waiting area. She spoke on the phone, calling people and asking them to pray. Todd walked away and found a private room. He was frightened, exhausted, and angry. Alone, he prayed loudly, demanding to know why God would allow his little boy to be taken from him. Inside the operating room, doctors removed infected tissue and cleaned Colton's abdomen. The crisis did not end there. He required a second operation, and complications kept him in medical care until March 19th, 2003, roughly 16 days after the ordeal began. When Colton finally improved, the family focused on the miracle directly in front of them. His color returned, His strength came back. The child who had looked lifeless began acting like himself again. He did not immediately wake and deliver a long description of heaven. The first clues came slowly, and the detail that first stopped his parents was not an angel, a golden street, or even the face of Jesus. It was something far more specific. Colton told them where they had been while he was in surgery. He saw what happened outside the room. Colton said that while doctors worked on his body, he was looking down from above. He described the operating room beneath him. He saw the people gathered around the table. Then his attention moved beyond the room, toward two people who were not standing together. He said Sonia Burpo was in one area, talking on the phone and praying. He said Todd Burpo was somewhere else, alone and praying loudly. That separation mattered. A child might guess that frightened parents would pray during surgery, but Colton did not place them side by side in a waiting room. He placed them in two different rooms, carrying out two different actions. His mother was speaking with other people. His father was alone, releasing anger and fear that he had not shown the family. Todd later said those private minutes had not been explained to Colton. The boy was under anesthesia, the staff were occupied with the emergency, and his parents were outside his normal sight. Yet his first scene matched the basic arrangement they remembered. This became the foundation of everything that followed. If Colton had begun only by describing angels, his parents might have treated it as a dream. He was a pastor's son. He knew Bible songs. He had heard adults speak about Jesus and heaven. But the hospital scene was recent, personal, and connected to actions that occurred while he was separated from both parents. It forced Todd and Sonia to listen. They did not announce the account to the world that day. They did not place a camera in front of him. They watched, waited, and asked small questions when Colton brought up the hospital. The memory appeared in pieces. Colton did not speak like an adult arranging evidence. He spoke like a child returning to certain images without warning. One image was the room below him. Another was his frightened father. Another was the sound of music. The family began to understand that Colton believed he had gone somewhere beyond the operating room. Still, they did not yet know who he believed had met him there. That answer came months later, during an ordinary family drive through North Platte. No church service had prepared the moment. No reporter was present. There was only a road, a hospital in the distance, and a simple question from a parent. Colton looked toward the place where he had nearly died and said it was where the angels sang to him, the parking lot, and the man who held him. The conversation happened during the 4th of July weekend in 2003, around 4 months after surgery. The Burpo family was passing through North Platte when the hospital came into view. Sonia asked Colton whether he remembered being there. His answer changed the family forever. He said that was where the angels sang to him. Todd pulled the vehicle into an Arby's parking lot and began asking what Colton meant. The setting was almost painfully normal. A family inside a parked car, traffic moving nearby, a restaurant sign outside, and a little boy describing something his parents could not see. Colton said the angels sang songs he already knew, including Jesus Loves Me and Joshua Fought the Battle of Jericho. Then he offered the kind of detail only a child would think was important. He had asked for We Will Rock You, but the angels did not sing it. The small joke made the account sound less rehearsed, not more. Colton was not trying to speak like a preacher. He was remembering fear, music, and comfort in the language available to him. He said he had been terrified when he found himself outside his body. Then he said Jesus asked the angels to sing because the music would calm him. When Todd asked where Jesus had been, Colton gave the sentence that would follow him for the rest of his life. He said he had been sitting on Jesus' lap. The person at the center of Christianity was not far away in a blinding light. He was close enough to hold a frightened child. That detail connects with a scene in the Gospels. When adults tried to keep children away from Jesus, he stopped them. In the Gospel of Mark, he welcomed the children, took them in his arms, and blessed them. Colton described the same pattern: a child afraid, Jesus near, and comfort given through personal contact. This was the moment the medical mystery became a spiritual one. How could a little boy describe events outside the operating room? Why did he speak of Jesus with such certainty? And if the God worshipped by billions could choose prophets, apostles, ordinary workers, and children throughout sacred history, was it truly impossible that one frightened boy in Nebraska could be chosen for a moment of comfort? Before the family could answer, Colton began speaking about people he could not have met on earth. Why would God choose a child? For tens of thousands of years, human beings have treated death as more than a biological ending. Archaeologists have found ancient burials containing beads, tools, pigments, and symbolic objects. They cannot tell us exactly what every person believed, but they show that questions about what comes next are older than written history. Those questions have never disappeared. Modern surveys count billions of religious believers. Christianity alone includes about 2.3 billion people. They do not all understand heaven in the same way, but they share a belief that the visible world may not be the whole reality. So the deepest question is not whether human beings have searched for God. They clearly have. The question is whether God, if he exists, can answer through one person. The Bible repeatedly says that he can. When Jesus began his public ministry in first century Galilee, he did not choose kings, governors, or famous scholars. Near the Sea of Galilee, he called Simon Peter and Andrew from their fishing nets, James and John from a boat, and Matthew, an unpopular tax collector. These men became the 12 apostles, not because the world had already judged them extraordinary, but because Jesus chose them and gave their ordinary lives a new purpose. The pattern continued after the crucifixion. The Gospels place women among the first witnesses to the empty tomb. Acts describes Saul, later Paul, being stopped on the road to Damascus and changed by a personal encounter. Christian faith does not say God speaks only through the powerful. It begins with shepherds, fishermen, widows, children, prisoners, and people whose lives changed after they were called by name. That does not automatically prove Colton's experience. It explains why the choice of a little boy is not strange inside the faith he described. If Jesus once walked along a shore and selected fishermen, why could he not meet a child in an operating room? If he once placed children in his arms, why would a child sitting on his lap be impossible? And if a blessing is truly a gift, why must the person receiving it first be old enough, famous enough, or important enough to deserve it? Colton's age was not the weakness. For believers, it may have been the point. He had no career to protect, no public name to enlarge, and no religious argument to sell. He returned with childlike details, songs, colors, relatives, and the feeling of safety. Then he named someone whose existence touched a wound his parents had never explained to him. The sister he had never met. Colton told his parents that a girl had approached him in heaven. She ran toward him, embraced him, and said she was his sister. Years before Colton was born, Sonia had suffered a miscarriage. Todd and Sonia had grieved the loss privately. They had not given Colton a detailed explanation of the pregnancy, and they said he did not know that the baby had been a girl. Yet Colton spoke of a sister waiting for the family. For Sonia, this was no longer a distant question about lights or angels. It touched a real child she had carried and lost. Colton's words did not erase that pain, but they gave it a different meaning. The daughter was not missing. She was known, she was joyful, she believed she belonged to the family. The detail later comforted parents who had experienced the same loss. Colton was saying that a child who never took a breath on earth still had identity, love, and a place in heaven. Then came another person from the family's past. Colton spoke about a man the family called Pop. His real name was Lawrence Barber, Todd's grandfather, who had died in a car accident in July 1976, more than 2 decades before Colton was born. When Todd showed Colton a picture of Pop as an older man, Colton did not recognize him. Later, the family showed him a photograph taken when Pop was younger. Colton identified him. To the Burpus, that difference mattered. The little boy had never met his great-grandfather. The younger face in the photograph was not the older version most often held in family memory. Yet Colton connected it with the man he said he had seen. Now the account contained 3 kinds of knowledge. Colton described the operating room and his parents' separate actions during surgery. He described an unborn sister whose loss came before his own life. and he recognized a great-grandfather who died before he was born. Together, the details created a pattern the family could not dismiss. The experience was about being known. The people Colton met were connected to him, even when he had never known them on Earth. One question still troubled him for years. What did Jesus actually look like? His parents showed him image after image. Colton kept saying no. Then he saw a portrait painted by another child. The face he finally recognized. The portrait was created by Akiane Kramaric, a young artist who said her work came from powerful spiritual experiences. She began drawing as a small child and completed the painting now known as Prince of Peace, while still very young. The image showed a dark-haired man with a strong face and unusually direct eyes. It was not the soft, pale figure found in many church pictures. The expression seemed calm, but it also carried intensity. For years, Todd and Sonia had shown Colton different images of Jesus. He rejected them. The hair was wrong. The face was wrong. The eyes were wrong. Nothing matched the person he remembered holding him. Then, he saw Akiane's painting. Colton stopped rejecting the face. He told his family this one was right. That moment connected two children who had never built their accounts together. Akiane painted the face through her own religious understanding. Colton later said the painting came closest to the Jesus he remembered from the operating room experience. A portrait cannot function like a hospital scan or record the supernatural. But it gave the public something the rest of Colton's description could not provide: a face to look at. The image spread through interviews, articles, television segments, and church presentations. People who could not picture the operating room could picture the eyes in the painting. But the real importance was not that millions liked the portrait. It was that Colton had said no to so many other faces first. He did not accept every religious image placed before him. The recognition came only after repeated rejection. By then, the Burpo family held a sequence that had become difficult to contain inside their home. The medical crisis, the view from above, the parents in separate rooms, the angels singing, Jesus holding him, the sister lost before birth, Pop as a younger man, and finally, the face in Prince of Peace. The family began sharing more widely. Todd worked with writer Lynn Vincent to arrange the memories into a book. That book would make the little boy famous, and fame would slowly make the real boy disappear. 10 million books, then silence. Heaven is for Real was published on November 2nd, 2010, more than 7 years after Colton's surgery. Readers responded with extraordinary speed. By 2014, sales had passed 10 million copies. Churches invited the family to speak. Television hosts placed Colton under studio lights and asked what adults had wondered for thousands of years: what happens when we die? Colton's answer remained simple. Heaven was real. Jesus was there. He had not been alone. In May 2011, the family created Heaven is for Real Ministries and continued traveling. Colton grew up while strangers studied his voice, expressions, and every difference between retellings. Then, Hollywood arrived. The film opened on April 16, 2014. Greg Kinnear played Todd, Kelly Riley played Sonia, and Connor Coram played Colton. Made for about $12 million, it earned roughly $100 million worldwide. That success fixed one image in the public mind: a little blonde boy staring into heaven. But the real Colton was already growing beyond it. The cameras wanted the child because the child was the mystery. A teenager with school, friends, doubts, and ordinary responsibilities was harder to package. As the film left theaters and the interviews slowed, the public kept the image but lost track of the person. This is how Colton vanished. He did not disappear from his family. He vanished from the huge public stage that had followed his every word. He learned a trade, built friendships, made mistakes, and discovered whether his faith could survive without a bestseller carrying it. The silence lasted for years. The book and film continued to circulate, yet many viewers did not know where Colton lived or whether the adults still accepted the child's words. That last question became more serious as he grew older. A small child can repeat what adults expect. A grown man can reject it. By the time Colton reached adulthood, he understood exactly how much easier his life might become if he walked away from the experience. Instead, he began to explain why the years outside the spotlight had made the encounter deeper, not smaller. The test of growing up. The hardest part of Colton's life did not happen under anesthesia. It happened after the world formed an opinion about him. Supporters treated his words as proof of heaven. Critics examined his childhood for influence and contradiction. Some approached him with gratitude, others tried to trap him. As a teenager, Colton became guarded. A casual sentence could become a headline, and strangers believed they understood him because they had read about his childhood. At the same time, he had to confront a private spiritual problem. Seeing Jesus at 3 did not make every later decision easy. It did not remove anger, temptation, confusion, or failure. Colton has said the encounter did not make him perfect. In high school, he began to feel that he could not live forever on one childhood moment. If faith was real, it had to exist in the present. It had to shape the way he worked, treated people, chose friends, loved his family, and responded when no audience was watching. That realization changed the meaning of the encounter. As a child, he wanted to tell people what he saw. As a man, he wanted to live as though it were true. He trained as an electrician in Colorado's Vail Valley and Eagle County. The work was practical. Wires had to connect, systems had to function, and jobs had to be completed whether anyone knew his name or not. He also moved toward church work, eventually serving as a worship pastor. The boy who once said angels sang to calm him was now helping other people worship through music. The symmetry was impossible to miss, yet he did not rush back into the largest possible spotlight. He married, he built a home, he prepared for fatherhood. The famous experience became part of his foundation, not the only sentence in his identity. Then, in 2025, he sat down for a new public interview. This time, no parent needed to explain what the little boy meant. The adult could answer for himself. And the most important thing about his return was not a new vision, a secret prophecy, or a more dramatic description of heaven. It was that after 22 years, his answer had not changed. The man finally returned. In a detailed interview released in May 2025, the man who had vanished behind the image of a famous child finally stepped forward. Colton described the medical crisis again. He said his appendix had ruptured and gone undetected for about 5 days. He remembered the emergency surgery. He remembered leaving his body and looking down while the doctors worked. He again placed his mother in one room, speaking with people and praying. He again placed his father in another room, praying loudly to God. He again described fear. And he again said that he found himself on the lap of Jesus, with angels singing to calm him. There was the answer the title had promised. The boy who saw Jesus had not returned to withdraw his words. The man still believed the encounter happened, but adulthood had changed what he believed the encounter was for. At 3, the experience was about survival and wonder. At 25, it had become a responsibility. Colton said his purpose was not to spend every day wishing he could return to heaven. His task was to live well in the life he had been given. He spoke about becoming a godly husband and father. He spoke about honoring Christ through his choices. He wanted other people to find the hope that had removed his fear of death. That was what he brought back after the years of silence. Not a new book designed to make the mystery larger. Not an object taken from heaven. Not a warning that the world was about to end. He brought back the adult voice the original account had been waiting for. The child could tell the world what he saw. Only the man could show whether that memory survived fame, pressure, doubt, work, marriage, and time. It did. There are facts no one disputes. A small boy became dangerously ill in Nebraska. His appendix ruptured. Doctors performed emergency surgery. He remained in medical care for more than 2 weeks. He recovered, and his family said he later described their separate actions during the operation. Then there is the testimony only Colton can give. He says he saw heaven. He says he met the sister who died before birth. He says he recognized Pop. He says angels sang. And he says Jesus held him. For more than 2 decades, the world argued over the child. Now the child is gone, and the man has answered in his own voice. If God could call fishermen beside the Sea of Galilee, choose a tax collector at his booth, meet Paul on the Damascus Road, and place children in the arms of Jesus, then the possibility at the center of Colton's life cannot be dismissed merely because he was young. Perhaps that was why the message came through a child in the first place. A child had no title, no power, no carefully built public identity. He only knew that he was frightened, that someone held him, and that he came home. Then he vanished into adulthood. And now Colton Burpo has finally returned, not as the little boy the world remembers, but as the man who still says the same thing: Jesus was there.